Okay.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Patriot Underground. Today is Monday, June 28th, 2021. Thank you so much for joining me. And I am very, very excited tonight because I'm having my second conversation with Omega. A lot of folks out there really resonated with our first conversation. I got a lot of great feedback. I know Omega did as well. And we're looking forward to bringing you hopefully another interesting conversation tonight. So thank you so much for joining me to discover the truth beneath the surface. Thank you so much for your continued support of the channel. I can't say enough about the support of all of the audience members out there and the people that are continuing to provide me with positive feedback. As I said earlier today, I actually did another coffee chat. I've been on a bit of a roll with those, but as I said earlier today, it really does fill me up with inspiration and passion to keep going and to keep bringing you this information, knowing that there are folks out there who want to listen and really appreciate the message. And I know Omega feels the same way. So Omega, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing really good, man. How are you tonight?
I'm doing excellent. Thank you so much for joining us. And I think maybe what we could do is, I know that last time we spoke, it was really literally the first day that you had decided you were going to do a podcast of your own. And figured maybe we could start there, just kind of talk about what your experience has been like so far. I think it's been a couple of weeks since we spoke. And, just talk about what it's been like just on a personal level for you now having this outlet and any thoughts you could share about how this has changed things for you, or maybe opened up new avenues that you probably didn't think you were going to go down, similar to me. So some thoughts on that. We can start there and then maybe talk about what's front and center, what's on your mind.
Okay. Well, it was like we were saying earlier, is that watching and listening to your videos of your work, and your videos popped up on BitChute talking about different things, and I was like, it's an interesting channel, and I could tell you're just a normal guy, just doing everything. And obviously, probably not have experience doing this kind of podcasts. And I was just like, you know what? It inspired me to do that because I'm like, he's talking from his heart. And I was like, I could do that. And I figured, I'd like to keep my anonymity for now. Maybe someday I'll get my face out there. And I could tell, a lot of people resonate with you. And I'm like, if I could resonate with you, a ton of people can resonate with me as well. Eventually, I don't care about the numbers. That's not my goal. I want to just give my opinion and perspective on what's going on out there. My opinion on what's going on in the world, and I would like to learn a lot more. There's just so much stuff Gene Decode talks about, and it's very interesting. And at first, I used to that's just that's down a lot of rabbit holes I don't want to get down. But then I'm like, it's got to have some kind of relevance. So yeah, really, it's just I've just been getting more inspired to be doing more. I did 2 more videos on Saturday on my channel. I read from Matt Bracken's one of his essays he posted up on AmericanPartisan.org.
Yeah, you and I were talking about that.
Yeah,
that sounded very interesting. Why don't you tell folks a little bit about that?
It's like you won't be able to stop reading this short. It's a short story. I'm sorry, not an essay, but it's a short story. I strongly recommend people pull this up. Let me pull up my channel real quick, and then I'll screen share this real quick so people
Absolutely
can see that. And then I have the website on there and everything. I'm just narrating from it. So so if you're at work, like I am a lot of times, it's nice to have something to just listening to. So I apologize for putting essay. It's not an essay. It's a short story. For some people out there that might be English majors or something. So I'm going to go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So it's here we go.
So here's so this is it's about an hour-long video. I just went across it and just talk about a few thoughts on current situation. Saturday night, and I'm just like watching all the craziness going on. So I'm just giving my my natural thoughts on things. So AmericanPartisan.org. It's on here. I have the link in the description over here, so people can read it for themselves. And I credit all this to Matt Bracken. I'd love to talk with him one day, just about just pick his brain on a lot of stuff. I love to listen to this guy. He's just badass. And
You
I
have his
wanted,
email? I'd love to get him on the show. I'd love to email him.
shoot, I don't. I think just type in Matt Bracken on. You could type in Matt Bracken on
Yeah, I'll take a
the
look. I just wasn't sure if you happened
yeah.
to
Uh,
know, but yeah, I would love to get
yeah,
Matt Bracken on. He is amazing.
it'll
Really,
go to
really.
it'll go to his book website, so you can probably get a hold of him there. And I read the first three books he did. It was Enemies Foreign and Domestic. That was the third one. They're very gripping books, very gripping.
Well,
But
they're so gripping because I mean, I've actually, to be honest with you, I haven't read them, but I listen to Matt Bracken a lot on
mhm,
InfoWars. No, I don't really listen to InfoWars that regularly anymore, but there was a time when I did, and he was a pretty regular guest. I'm not sure if he still is,
he
but
is, yeah,
he
he
talked
is.
a lot.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I got to know him pretty well through his frequent interviews, and I always found him to be fascinating. And what I really enjoyed about his stories, and what he would describe about them is how relevant they were, how eerily similar they were to what was actually happening. And I think that was kind of the crux of what you were trying to get across in
Mhm.
terms of what we see unfolding right now and the similarities in Matt Bracken's work. And as you point out, of course, he's a former Navy SEAL. So what were some of the main similarities that you drew out there for your audience between the short story and some of the things that you see unfolding right now? And then maybe talk about what's
Well,
front and center for Omega right now.
it hit me because I remember reading this short story, and it's called What I Saw at the Coup, and it's an individual who is I won't spoil the whole thing, but she's writing um, her storyline. What led up to pretty much the demise of her and all these people that literally tried taking over the country through violent force. Um, Obviously, Democrats, and having a private conversation with a guy who's very sneaky, very smart guy, but very sneaky and very scarily um, of just what they want to do to right wingers. And really, it's about them planning. They disappear 2,000 right wing podcasters, and 2,000 people during a normal time. It would go noticed, but a war with Iran and Syria breaks out. Now, what's interesting, the timeline, what's going on right now is Iran. Things are heating up with Iran right now. So it's kind of like, oh crap. At the same time, look what the FBI has been doing to all those people that showed up in DC. There's people that showed up in DC um, that weren't even near the Capitol building, and they're being arrested. No due process, no nothing. I mean, that's the Gestapo right there. So what's going on with that? I'm thinking to myself, like, Matt Bracken's story just popped up in my mind, and I'm like, I need to get this out there because I don't think a lot of people understand that this man predicted many of these things years ago, and he's putting this out there as a warning. He's not putting it out there because he wants to. And
Oh, of course. Yeah.
I put my thoughts out there of like, I believe we can possibly go into a red versus blue situation in this country where red versus blue states are going to split off, and because it's difficult, it's very difficult to reconcile differences when one side is literally trying to legalize pedophilia. It's like, I'm like, there's a line we can no longer
Well, see,
allow a lot of cross.
I'm glad you brought that up because a lot of people have been talking about the real representation that the left has throughout the country. And my theory is that, yes, I mean, I don't disagree with anything that you just said, but my theory is that what we are led to believe is the percentage of the country that actually supports these types of endeavors, shall we say, to these perversions. I think that there's a very small percentage of the country that actually supports these things. And my theory has always been that the media really has been very effective in one of their biggest lies, and one of their most effective lies is in convincing most of the public that the rest of the public is actually supportive of their agenda and of their ideology and the world that they want to bring forth. And I wonder about that because I know a lot of liberals, I don't know how many you know, but I certainly know a lot of people who are so-called liberals. Of course, they're not really liberals in the true sense, but I know a lot of liberals. And by and large, the ones that I know, I mean, I can't say that I know any that would go that far in terms of wanting to legalize or, normalize pedophilia. The problem is that the media is so effective at deception that they're able to convince, you take something like they're able to convince the public that it's something, it's something innocent. It's something totally, it's, I don't want to say PC, but, accepting and all of that sort of thing. They're able to hoodwink people with stuff like, the drag queen story hours and the things like that. A lot of well-meaning people. And I'm curious because, I really don't think that when you look at the American population, I don't think that a majority of the American population, anywhere close even to half of it, would consider that type of society to be the direction we should be going. I mean, do you disagree with that, or what do you think? I mean, do you think that a lot of people out there actually support this type of stuff, or do you think it's really just some sick people who are pushing their agenda onto society and making it appear as if they have all this support in the same way they make it appear that Joe Biden got 80 million votes or whatever, that's what they do. You see, they're masters of deception. And I think the more the Great Awakening is unfolding, the more we're realizing that. And not only are we realizing that, but we're also realizing the magnitude and depth of their perception, of their deception, excuse me. We're talking about, this is the same group of people that were able to hide the truth about what really was the reason and what really caused the sinking of the Titanic. I mean, most of the public doesn't even know the truth about that story. So everything that they do is rooted in deception. So tying that back into the pedophilia and the sick perversions that we see that the far left is trying to push onto society and make it appear as if people actually support it when most really don't. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's multiple things. I think it started off as an extremely small percentage of people, and at first we're like horrified by the idea of doing things like that to children and obviously under the adult age. But the problem I've seen, and I've been watching this for about a good decade, is the LGBT, the whole alphabet they're using in there, is they just keep adding more things to it, and they've slipped it in. And I think the real insidious elitists, I think they know what's coming, and they're just trying to normalize it, at least for the left, enough to say, they have that much hatred for anyone that's not in their clique, at least the radical ones, so that they'll tolerate enough of it in terms of, oh, you're racist if you don't agree with that. So it's groupthink, it's communist think.
I agree.
So I don't believe that a lot of people really believe that, but the problem is they'll follow anything just because they have so much hatred, and I think that's clouded their judgment. And the problem with that is hate can probably be worse than than being a heroin addict at some point, because I mean, if someone's doing heroin, they're gonna limit themselves in what they can cognitively do. Hate can get someone to do things that they normally wouldn't do, and start to normalize violence in their minds, and eventually bring it out.
I agree. I think a
Yeah,
lot of this really stems from the programming that these folks have.
yeah,
I mean, I've talked a lot about this, that we've been born into a society and we've been programmed since birth to believe certain things and to have a certain bias towards what we hear on TV and what we hear as mainstream as truthful. I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, I associated the mainstream. I thought that it was the mainstream because most people agreed that this was the best sourced information out there, and that it was the most truthful information. It was, of course, I was young, I was very naive, but that was my perception. And I think that fortunately, I grew out of that. But there are a lot of folks out there who never do,
yeah,
and never actually branch out. And it's frightening, because I do agree with you that I think the real issue that we're facing is the fact that these folks are so programmed to believe everything that they hear from the media. And if the media is normalizing or attempting to normalize this perversion, this sickness in our society, I don't believe, ultimately, I don't believe that most folks, I think at that point would draw a line in the sand and just say, you know, we're not going down this road. We're not actually, you know, into pedophilia. We're not going to give you access to our children, you know. I wonder though, where this is all going to lead because of the programming from the mainstream media, because there's, as you pointed out, these people are so filled with hate and they don't really know what to do with it. But that hate, I think, is coming from the programming that they've had since birth to be hostile toward any information that doesn't come from the cabal.
Mm-hmm.
And that sort of programming is, I think, what we're facing right now with so many people, even though they don't. I think if you sat down with your average liberal and you said, okay, do you actually believe that this is what we should be doing? Do you actually believe that, you know, children and adults? I think most people who, I can't imagine that folks could be brainwashed that far into saying, well, I think that's probably okay under certain circumstances. I mean, I think we're getting very close to the point where you can only push folks so far.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a lot of people out there who are talking about the fact that people are waking up. And this has to be a big part of that, because I think that you're right in the sense that people want to just kind of go along. They don't want to make any waves. They don't want to speak out. They don't want to say anything. And they have all this hatred inside of them. But I think at a certain point in time, there's only so much that folks are going to actually go along with. And I think that that's a big reason why people are waking up. And of course, we're sort of honing in on one issue. There are many, of course, it's a huge issue, but there are many issues that are waking people up. And I mean, I've talked a lot about the process of waking people up. What's that been like for you? Have you been able to really get through to people? What's your experience been like in terms of being able to wake folks up? And talk about that.
I guess it just depends on the person. I can give you an example on the inauguration day when the Mr. Potato Head Manchurian candidate was up there doing his fake inauguration with the Third Reich lookalike of an inauguration, putting all these flags up there as the crowd. It was very similar to how they did it in Nazi Germany. You know, just quite the correlation. I told one guy at work, cool dude, and he's been there for about 8 years, and I'm like, that's a fake presidency. The guy flipped out on me, and I thought he was a liberal. He's like, hell no. He's like, I love Trump, man. They ain't taking my guns. And I'm like, dude, there's a lot of things that people don't know, but he's a right winger, but he believes what the mainstream media tells him, and this is a huge problem because there's people who, because it's on the mainstream channels, are like, oh, that's conspiracy theory. And I'm like, look into it first. I said, did you know our country's constitution has been altered just by one bill called the Act of 1871? And I says, please look it up for yourself and understand that the United States has been a corporation. No country is supposed to be a corporation. It's supposed to be a nation. And I says, look this up. I says, Biden, he stole his way in. I'm like, would you agree that this guy certainly wasn't even popular? He's like, oh yeah, this guy sat home. I was like, there's no way this guy won legit. Like, exactly. So start from there. Like, yeah, is he the acting CEO for now in a bankrupt corporation? Yeah. And the whoever's tolerating it are all these elite companies and the media. So it's like Juan O'Savin says, it's the media's president. I says, so right now we're dealing with this, and this, I'm like, believe me, dude, this angers me big time, but I'm trying to, try to find some humor in it too, so I don't lose my flipping mind. And, the guy was so pissed off at just what's going on, so disgusted, but he wasn't ready to hear a lot of the stuff that's what's going on. So I guess there's different levels. Some people, another guy at work, he's pretty awake, and he's like, hey man, did you hear what's going on in DC? And I'm like, I entertained. I'm like, oh, what do you mean? He's like, yeah, man, there's been flooding. I'm like, okay. So he's at a deeper level. You could talk to him about that. So I think the best thing to do is just kind of gauge where people are at. Just be like, hey, what do you think what's going on in DC? Is the FBI building's closed down from what I heard? See what people say. If they're like, oh, it's just a bunch of uh, uh the QAnon stuff, and I'm like, well, first off, there's no such thing as QAnon. There's anonymous people, and there's the Q posts. Yet there's people who coined QAnon. It's like, no, that never existed, and that's where people are just like, I didn't
Well, it's
believe
just like the media created the term assault weapon.
Oh yeah.
It doesn't actually exist well, it does not, but not in the form that they're talking about. It's just what they do. They completely distort reality.
Oh, absolutely. It's an assault rifle. Now, there's some companies for an example that I believe it's FN. They make one of their SCAR weapons, and they call it an assault rifle. So it's just their branding of that, what they call it. There's no such thing as an assault rifle. That was like more of like a video game term. Well, here I picked up the assault rifle ammunition over here.
Just the term to demonize.
Yeah, it's like people will play not even Call of Duty, but they'll play some video game. Oh, you picked up the assault rifle, and I'm like, what caliber? It just says, oh, you picked up assault rifle ammo. I'm like, well, 5.56 and 7.62 by 39 are diabolically different. It's like, okay, it's like they don't even do their homework. There's no such thing as an assault weapon, but people don't realize if they consider the 1940s weapons, the M1 Garand is severely much than an M4. How come they're not calling that an assault?
No, absolutely. I completely agree.
It's nothing more than a rate of fire. And they won't even come out and say that, and they'll just bullshit everybody on everything of that. And that's it. Sorry, kind of going a tangent on guns there, but it's just like, is that's why, but their narrative has failed badly on guns. They can't even pass gun control when they allegedly have a majority in all the chambers of the government. So something over here is like, wait a minute, I think they know, I think they understand something, and they're just trying to play theater to their radical
where they're not really in control.
Or they could not be in control, because I'm like, wait a minute, that guy they were trying to push through, David Chipman. You should see the memes on this guy. This guy is so hated. This guy had a picture. He stood on the rubble at Waco after they burned the place down. He posed. He was an ATF agent. That's what kind of psychotic people you have. Even people in the ATF said, this guy's a radical. We don't want him in here. So imagine an ATF agent saying, we don't want him. He's going to get us into some serious trouble. But there's ATF agents that are terrified if this guy ever got in. And they had to stall the vote, which basically means he's not going to get it. It's because there's so much backlash going on. People are waking up, and I think this is one of the things the White Hats wanted to do, is get the response from the people of, get off your butt and start screaming at your representatives. You're not going to take this crap. So I think what's been going on is President Trump. I didn't watch the rally the other night, but I heard the quote where he said there is no 2022 or 2024, and I'm like, yes. Because he said what's on our minds. He said exactly what's going on. He had to kind of play coy for a while, I noticed, until there's enough momentum to come out there, and then people are like, Mr. President, they stole this. And he said they stole this. So he's using the exact terminology that Patriots have been using for months, since November. And he was playing kind of neutral for a while. I think you're going to see a lot of differences now.
I think that was a lot of really was just gaming the enemy.
I think it was,
like Gene talked about. I think that this whole thing has been a pantomime, and I realize that you kind of put yourself out there on a limb somewhat when you say that, because there's no way to prove either way. If it's a pantomime, if this entire thing that, what we're witnessing right now, what I've been talking about on my show is that what we're witnessing is a pantomime. And what we're witnessing is the slow rollout of information of events that have already taken place, and that a lot of the key players, I don't believe that necessarily everybody has been dealt with, and that we're just looking at fakes and clones of everybody.
Oh, not even close.
But I definitely believe that there are a lot of the key players that have been taken out. I don't believe that that's Joe Biden for a second.
No, I don't either.
I don't believe that I believe that Joe Biden has already been dealt with. I believe that Fauci and a lot of the key players, Hillary, Podesta, there's a long list of folks that I've heard have already been tried and executed. And that what we're really witnessing right now is the production of a scripted movie, I guess you could say, in order to wake up the public before the truth bombs really get dropped. Now, there's a possibility, of course, you have to be honest with it when your assessment and say, well, there's always a possibility that that's not the case. And that, like we're headed toward a real situation where things are going to hardcore devolve in this country, similar to what you were talking about, that we could be headed toward a civil war, which is before, I think I shared this with you already, but before I really got into learning more about Q, I really thought that it was a foregone conclusion that that's where we were headed. And it wasn't until I started to learn about this plan that I started to change my perspective. And then once I started to see things unfold in the way that they do and the way that they have, it really convinced me at a certain point that what we're witnessing right now is the country is being put through a meat grinder on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And in order for us to wake up, in order for us to shake off the apathy and to actually get off the sidelines and to become more active and vocal in whatever ways that we can. And I think that I've said, and I really believe this to be true, that ultimately the reason that we're here, even though it's a bitter pill to swallow for a lot of patriots, the reason that we're here is because collectively we allowed these people to take control. We allowed other people to make the decisions, and for us to sit back, the appeal for us was that we could sit back and we could not concern ourselves with these things, and we could just operate under the assumption that these people had our best interest in mind and go to sleep. And that's exactly what we did. And it's not just one generation's fault. I mean, this is humanity's fault in essence, collectively, not necessarily entirely humanity's, not entirely. It's not entirely as if you can blame humanity as we've been under attack this entire time. But I do believe that we are being put through this whole process in order to teach us a very important lesson, which is that this is the type of world that you end up with when you sit back and you let other people take control and you become apathetic and you don't pay attention. And I think that there's a big part of it. And I've also talked about how humanity has been victimized by the mind control, by the poisoning of the, basically all the different ways that they've weakened us and poisoned us through our food, through our water, through basically, I could go on and on and on about how the different ways that they've done this to us. So there's that element as well. So it's not as if it's just one or the other, but I think that what we're seeing right now is we are seeing the final act in a story that really started way back in the 60s.
Yeah.
And that's what I believe. And if I'm wrong about that, well, then I'm wrong about that. Then I guess there's not much you can say at that point other than, yeah, you better be prepared, which I am, at least to the best of my ability. And that's why I can really relate to the things that you talk about in terms of being prepared, because I never put all of my eggs in one basket. If I don't know 100% for a fact if something is going to happen, I always, in some ways, have to hedge my bets and say, well, there's a possibility here that I could be wrong about this thing. And if things get really ugly, which they appear to be getting uglier and uglier by the day, as you point out, then that's the eventuality. But we've really kind of hit that crossroads, I think. And either you have faith in my view, either you have faith in the plan for as long as you can, or you're in essence, I really think you're gearing up for that conflict. I think folks are kind of on one of two camps right now.
I think it's good to include both precautions because plans. Juan Savin himself said it. There's 1,000 things that can go wrong. 1,000 things go wrong, and President Trump probably knows about 500 of them. And he doesn't even know the other 500. Only God knows the full 1,000 of them. Could things go very south? Yeah, the deep state could try to pull as a a coup de grace, saying, okay, well, you won on all this stuff, but we're going to make sure that the country's broken for like a few years or something, and just cause start doing weather underground bombings everywhere. I mean, interestingly enough, in Miami, that building that so-called collapsed. I heard that was John McAfee's apartment there. And then he came, and the guy looked like, just like John McAfee, came out and said, "Yeah, that was a clone they took out or something." I'm like, "What?" But
Really, I didn't see that.
Yeah, I heard. Was it Melissa Red Pill the World? Look her channel up. Great lady, and she was on. I think she was on Blessed to Teach as well. She's been on a lot of channels lately. She's been growing, but highly recommend her channel. Melissa Red Pill the World.
I think I've heard of her actually.
Yeah. She's I like her because she's she's very down to earth, very strong Christian lady, and I actually have her book. It's called End Times Peace: 1,000 Years of Peace. So she has a different interpretation on Revelations. She believes that the revelations in there, it's not for the end of the world for us, it's the end of the world for the cabal. And I'm like, that's actually very interesting. And people are like, no, it has to only be this way or we're all screwed. I'm like, why do we have to believe that? I look at it this
people
way.
Are locked into their ideologies.
Yeah, it's like years ago I thought that too, but I'm like, I could be misinterpreting things too. Think about this. In the 1940s, how many antichrists were there? There was Adolf Hitler. There was Joseph Stalin. There was, I think Pol Pot was somewhere around that time, the 40s and 50s. Then you had Mao in the 30s. You're telling me there's just one? There's just one? No, there are multiple. People went through their apocalyptic period. I mean, look at the Soviet Union. I got friends that live in New York City. They're from my friend. He's a friend of his wife. His wife is from Ukraine, and he's from Georgia. And I can tell you, they both flat out are so livid right now. What's going on? And I've had to like try to calm them down. I'm like, guys, we're not going to fall. We're not going to fall into what the USSR was. Not that simple. This country is extremely well armed. If a communist push was like they pass this law tomorrow, you'll see the country split up very, very fast. Because
let me ask you this. So when going back to the election and going back to the inauguration, okay, I definitely did not expect that Joe Biden was going to be allowed to be president. And you mentioned 107. Actually, that's something that he said before the election, that Joe Biden was going to be allowed to be president.
That was like a gut punch. I'm like, are you kidding me? People were so pissed.
Right, exactly.
On Michael Jaco's channel, and Michael Jaco was like, his facial expressions were like, oh my gosh, what's going on here?
Right. So nobody wanted to hear that. Nobody wanted to believe that, and not many people did, even though it came from 107. And then of course it ended up happening. Now, my feeling is this: if a Biden presidency, or any Democrat presidency, but we're dealing with Joe Biden. If a Biden presidency, the White Hats knew that a Biden presidency was going to send this country over a cliff, literally, and lead us directly into a civil war. My feeling is that the military would have stepped in, because if they thought that there was no other option, and that if Joe Biden seized power, that we were going to head into a civil war, I believe that the military and the White Hats at that point would have taken action had they not had a bigger plan. That's my feeling on it, because Trump talked nonstop for an entire 4 years about what the Democrats wanted to do to this country, and resonated, of course, with all of his supporters, because we've recognized this is exactly what they wanted to do. So we have to know that, and I guess it comes down to, do the white hats exist? Does the military actually support we the people by and large? Of course, the military is a microcosm of society. We could talk about that, but does the military actually support the Constitution and the people? And do the military generals who supported Trump, would they not have made their move if they thought that we actually were at that point where, if they didn't make a move and they didn't step in militarily when they had the chance, that the American people were going to end up having to fight one another? What do you think?
I think there's probably factions of white hats that are probably also in disagreement of how this plan is going to play out. And I think some of them are probably pissed off that the things have had to go on this long, and are probably really worried that the deep state is how psychotic and evil they are. They don't care. They'll blow up a city in a red state just to make a point. They don't care.
Right, but knowing that, don't you think the alliance would have stepped in and said, "Look, this is it. This is the end of the road here. Because if we don't,"
yeah, I think they're gonna. I think they're gonna stop, like, bombs going off, a military invasion. Mike Adams did something the other day on Infowars, saying for citizens to prepare for a possible invasion, a military invasion. That's a possibility. I think, but 107 did state that there's still 3 naval task force carriers, 3 of them, and that's like 100 ships each, and they're stationed off the coasts. So they know something's going on. So I think they've postured themselves to stop an invasion, and I think they're getting help from Russia. To be honest, from what I heard, Russia is assisting the white hats, and I think they're stopping the macro aggressions. Basically, you could say the big bombs going off, of possible nukes and bioweapons from coming in, but they can't control what's going to happen in the neighborhoods. And that's, I think, where the military is going to get nervous and say, okay, we're not so worried about the right wingers because they've been pretty cool with things considering what's been going on. It's how far are the left going to push some people? Just an example, go take their kids because they didn't take a jab. They might do this in some places, and that could, just for the deep state, just to get us to do something that we normally wouldn't do. I mean, anybody goes after your kid, listen, you got free reign to go protect your kid any way, shape, or form, and I don't care what the uniform looks like coming after your children. Screw that. That's your children. Yeah, if they violate your natural rights, come after food, guns, whatever it may be, there is a point of no return that if that's crossed, and I'm surprised it hasn't happened yet, and that's actually good.
Well, I think there's a reason it hasn't happened. I think it's because ultimately, I don't really think Biden and the Democrats are in control. I think that they were very clear about what they wanted to do.
Oh, absolutely.
I think it's very obvious that the military is not backing Joe Biden, that he is not really the commander in chief. I think if you look at all of the evidence, it's pretty clear. Now, I definitely agree that in terms of the local level, that folks need to be prepared, because you're right. I mean, once this information does come out, whatever big event happens that is the catalyst for everything that's going to happen, and we don't really know what it's going to be yet, but whatever that big event is, or big events, plural, we really don't know how people are going to react. Now, is it possible that the technology exists, that they've actually been able to actually game this stuff out to that degree? It's possible, based on what I'm hearing, based upon the quantum computing systems that they have and the looking glass and things like that. But putting that aside for a moment, I agree that they can't, based upon what we know, that they can't predict and can't really control what's going to happen in any given city, in any given neighborhood, how folks are going to react. So
Yeah.
I do think that people need to be prepared. And I also do think that there are going to be pockets of violence. I've been very clear about that.
Oh
I think
yeah. Oh
there
yeah.
certainly are going to be pockets of violence, but I don't think it's going to be the American people that are going to be fighting the American people. I think that the military is going to have assets in place to be able to quell any type of violence that goes on. That's my personal view on it. Do I think that there could be some American patriots who end up in firefights? It could happen. I'm not saying it couldn't happen. It very likely could happen, but I don't really see it that way. I think the military has assets all over the country that we don't even know about. And they
Yeah.
know where the hot spots are. And I also would add that I think that a lot of these people who are posturing, when it really comes down to it, they're not going to fight the US military.
Well,
They're just not going to. They're going to drop down their weapons and run.
well, the reality is I think they're putting SOF, Special Operations Forces. I think they put them all over the country, embedded in all different kinds of workplaces and all this kind of thing. And I think the influence of these men, most of special operations are men, or it's like 99% men. It's like very rare if a woman ends up in special forces. That's from what I've heard. Nothing with that. I'm sure there's there's that one rare woman that could get into special forces of some kind. But I think they have at the intel level basically, and intel basically is they're on the street gauging what people are saying, not just behind a computer. They're in the street. They're figuring things out. One of my good friends, he's from England, and he worked 2 years in on the with the SAS, the Special Air Service, as intelligence, and taught me a few things. And he says, look, intel, it sounds all cool like that, but it's like, we've spent days in different Eastern European countries with like 3 guys spread out like miles wide to just gain information. And so I think like I said, the military, I think they do have a really good indication what's going on. They're not going to be able to stop the pockets, but I think what's going to end up happening, I think if there's pockets that do arise, we're probably going to have some help from them at a very, very quiet level. So let's, for example, I've been listening to the book Crisis by Kurt Schlichter, where the country does go into a very brief civil war. It's very brief, and then they split. And they send these guys out to try and stop things. What happens is in DC, they stole the country. They're all the MAGA people are there protesting, and then the left, this radical leftist militia, even worse than Antifa, they end up dressing up like Trump supporters, and they start shooting a bunch of cops in DC. And then, oh look, see, the Trump supporters did that. So the character in there, he's going after a certain individual who's a leader of this group, and it gets extremely ugly. So I think if there's hot spots that do show up, there's going to be individuals that will intercept as best as they can, but they don't even have control of what could happen after that. So
yeah, I agree with you.
I do believe the military has assets on the ground, and being extremely quiet about it. That's how the military operates. They never operate in full BDUs on that unless they're doing something official. Most of the stuff they're doing is unofficial. If they're caught, they will be disavowed. That's usually when in operations like this. So obviously the white hats are going to take care of their own, but if they're caught by the by the deep state, whatever they know, they cannot afford to give up what they know. And I think that's the professionalism of the SOF people is absolutely critical. The hell with drones and satellites. It's the people on the ground with special forces training, how to integrate into crowds, how to do all these things, how to blend in so well. You wouldn't even think anything of it. You'd think this guy looks like,
absolutely.
Looks like some mechanic at a shop, dirty, whatever. And this guy's special forces. He's a Marine Force recon, and he was trained for the past few years on how to embed inside you know, inside different groups, just, just to get in things. They do train people like this. And I
Yeah,
think,
I think that there's a lot of that going on. I think
oh
there's a
yeah,
lot
oh
more
yeah,
of that going on that even people like us are aware of, because this has been, I think he started moving assets really day one,
yes.
military
He
assets
had
all
to.
over
Oh
the
yeah, he
country.
had to.
And
Every single day he was in office, at least the first 4 years, he couldn't waste any time. He had to figure out who in the military was for the Constitution. He had to figure all this out, and then it probably took him a good 2 years to figure out who in the military are patriots and who are traitors.
all
And
right,
it
exactly.
takes
And
a long time. Yeah,
I don't
it
think
takes
that Trump did all of this just so that he could sit back and watch the country fall apart.
no, not at all.
And
Because
and I
you
mean,
know,
forget about letting Biden steal his lunch. I mean, that's not what this is about. Trump understands very well what's happening. And you just listen to Trump's recent rhetoric. You brought it up. And
if
the fact that he's starting up rallies again, and the fact that it's coinciding with the buildup toward the audit information coming out, and you look at all of the disclosure that's happening, it's not business as usual. And
no,
certainly if Joe Biden was really in control, a lot of those executive orders that Trump put in place that were specifically targeted toward freezing the assets of people that are involved in the types of crimes that Joe Biden was involved in, those executive orders would have been gone on day one. And that's just
yes,
one example. So if Joe Biden was really Joe Biden, he was really in control, I think that we would be seeing a lot of different things actually going on. That's why I believe when you look at all the different factors and how they all fit together like puzzle pieces, that's why I believe that what we're witnessing right now is really the final stages that have been set and that have been put in motion. I think that what we're witnessing now is the rollout of information, like I said, that probably of things that happened a year or two ago.
you
And
know,
that it's going to be a very that I believe that the main problem that we're facing in terms of moving forward as a country is the awakening of the public to the truth. And the white hats understand very well, and I can't remember if you and I discussed this, but they understand very well that the conditioning of the public, the reason that people are so dumbed down, it didn't just happen overnight. It wasn't like somebody flipped the switch and the American population just went to sleep and got dumbed down and apathetic and decadent and all of the things that we became. That didn't happen overnight. This was a very long process that led us here. And so it makes perfect sense that you can't flip a switch on the way out and undo everything that was done over decades and decades and decades to people of conditioning and actual hardcore mind control through the mainstream media, of course, but it goes beyond that. And we could get into that at some point, but this has to be a methodical process. And I don't believe for a second that even if you go back to the beginning, I don't believe for a second that if Donald Trump didn't have a fatalistic attitude about this whole thing and didn't recognize that this country was going off a cliff and that we had a very narrow window and he was the only man who could do the job, if he didn't recognize all that stuff, there's no way that he would have given up his life and everything that he had. I mean, it amazes me when people talk about Trump and they talk about how these lunatics who think that Trump wanted to become president just so he could get more power. It's like, what are you talking about? This guy was a billionaire. He had an amazing life. He could do whatever he wanted. He lost way more on some levels by becoming president than he ever gained, on some levels. And people just, so I don't think that Trump, knowing what I know about Trump and what I've observed, I don't think that there's any way that, and this is what really got me to buy into the Q plan, is that I don't really believe that Trump ever would have gotten involved in the beginning and would have allowed, and just to walk away in the end after a fraudulent election. That's just glaringly obvious that Trump is just going to simply walk away into the sunset and let this country devolve into a civil war. To me, that is far, far more unbelievable than the concept that there is a plan in place and we just haven't been fully made aware of it yet.
Yeah. Yeah, and I agree on that assessment. Obviously, and like I said, a plan can look so perfect on paper and be computed out perfectly, and things could still go wrong. And I think that many people, Gene Decode, 107, many others have said the situation is fluid. It's like water. It's not gonna. It's nothing is gonna look the same. Things are gonna change second by second. So they have to be extremely fluid of what's going on. I think they wanted to wrap these. I think they wanted to have President Trump back in office even back in March. But 107 said something very interesting. He said March 11th was something really, really big. He didn't say what it was, but he was there in DC. And if you remember, the prices at the Trump Hotel in DC were like, I think like 3 times the amount, the normal amount for the fourth, I think between the third and the fifth. There were, if you looked at those prices, and it was all over, a lot of channels did that.
Yeah, I do remember that.
Something was going down, but they kept it very quiet. And I think that was a pivoting point. But what I also found recently that actually is getting my hopes up a lot more and like realistically is the fact that DHS is terrified that people are believing that President Trump could be back in office. So I think they put that out there at first to say, nah, he's gone, he's out of there. Wait a minute, now the mainstream media is saying, ho, these Q people think the President Trump's gonna, former President Trump is gonna get back reinstated, ha. And what's his name, Boris Epstein talks on War Room. Steve Bannon said the Constitution states that fraud vitiates everything. There may not be a mechanism at this moment to reinstate a president that's been stolen, but there's nothing in the Constitution that bars him from coming back in, actually to serve his legitimate term right now. So they're saying this out in the open now, when months ago, like people like us were like, yeah, this is what they should be doing. This is what that's. Now it's in the mainstream. So I think they had to prime the public to be like, basically the public had to get so pissed off what's going on and really scared about what's going to end up happening.
Yeah.
I mean, the Biden or whoever's playing him, that's not even him. I mean, literally whoever's playing him is that good of an actor. They're making him look like such a moron. I mean, yeah, you remember what he said years ago after Sandy Hook? Buy a shotgun. You know, if someone comes to your door, just shoot 2 rounds up in the air and then shoot them through the door. And people were like, what if it's a Girl Scout coming? You're going to shoot through the door, you freaking maniac. But even that Biden said some dumb things, but he wasn't as dumb as what we're seeing now. Not even close. And I don't even think that's real dementia. I think it's an act.
Oh, absolutely.
I think
absolutely it is. And I think that he's being put there specifically because I don't think Joe Biden, the real Joe Biden, I don't think is alive.
I think he's dead. Yeah.
I really don't. I think that the real Joe Biden was taken out along with some very other high profile people. Yeah. Now, can I prove that? No, I can't prove it, but I certainly can prove that I've seen Joe Biden's head disappear and his hands go through the microphones. I can certainly prove that. I can certainly prove a lot of discrepancies about his appearance and his, you know, you're right, his bizarre antics. I mean, just when you think it can't get more bizarre, Joe Biden somehow figures out a way to do it. But I don't think that this is the real Joe Biden. So again, if that's not the real Joe Biden, and that's an actor or a body, you know, a clone or whatever it is, but it's not the real Joe Biden, again, leads me to believe that there is something major going down here and that it's not business as usual. I've talked about it a lot that in DC, it's a ghost town. They're saying that the events are going on in DC when they're actually not going on. You have citizen journalists out there who are pointing this out. They're saying things are going on in the Rose Garden where they're not.
Yeah.
And then we find out that there's another that they have basically duplicates of the White House in multiple parts of the country, and that they were shooting a lot of scenes in Castle Rock, and then there was also the property that Tyler Perry owns down in Atlanta that looks exactly like the White House. And you can just go on and list all of the things that just don't add up and don't make sense, all of the protocols that aren't being followed. It's almost as if, and I know 107, we've talked a lot about him tonight, but he's pointed this out many times, that the security services, the people who are in charge of supposedly keeping Biden safe, are essentially pulling down their pants in front of the public and trying to wake people up to show them that they're not following the normal protocols. There's it's just good, like even things like having him carry his own luggage and things like that presidents just never do that. And so that folks who are paying attention pick up upon these things. Mm-hmm. And so all of this stuff is all going on. It leads me to believe that this is all a pantomime. Now, again, coming back to what it's like for just ordinary folks like you and I, when all of this stuff happens, what's it going to look like in our neighborhoods? What's it going to look like in our cities? How are people going to react? There's no way of knowing. And I think that there's going to be a myriad of different reactions. I think they're going to, some people are probably going to get violent. I think there are probably going to be other people who are just going to be almost catatonic and crying and just terrified and afraid. And, you got to remember, man, this is their entire world is going to come crashing down. Yeah. Once all of this information comes out about the DUMBs and about the adrenochrome and about all of this stuff, people are absolutely they're not going to know what to do. They're not going to know how to react. That's just it. There are going to be some people who are going to not believe it, and there are going to be some people who are going to get violent. But I think on average, I don't think most people are going to react that way. I think most people are just going to be shocked and horrified and terrified and not know what to do. I think people are literally going to be in a state of shock. And this is another issue that I've talked a lot about, which is the role of patriots when all this stuff goes down. Because like you, as someone who has a prepared mindset, and I spent most of my time over these last several years basically gearing myself up for an eventual unraveling of society. Mm-hmm. And I never really thought that there was any way to avoid it because the country was just so divided. And, but at that point, I wasn't even that knowledgeable about the cabal and this and that. But eventually, once you become more aware of what the real dynamic is, and I think once the general public becomes aware of what the real dynamic is, once they start learning that the entire power structure has been against them, that all of the people that they've trusted, from presidents to celebrities to, the list just goes on and on. All of these people that they've trusted for their entire lives and built a foundation upon that trust is all going to come crashing down all at once. And not to mention that, it's not even that these people are just kind of not who they thought they were. They're going to find out that these people are the most evil, satanic trash on the planet. And they're going to be horrified beyond belief when they start to realize and start to learn about what's been going on. And just in one place alone, just in DC alone, the depravity, the things that they found underneath those tunnels in DC. That's just one example. And once all of this information comes out, I guess the point I'm making is there's really no way to know how people are going to react. And I think that a majority of folks are going to just really feel broken. I think in the beginning, there may be some denial, there may be some anger, but the more this information comes out and it's irrefutable, don't forget, if what I'm saying, if actually is true, and if this comes to fruition, we're going to hear confessions. We're going to hear testimony, witness testimony. We're going to see military tribunals. We're probably going to see executions. This is going to be very, very real for people. And so it really obviously it all depends upon what happens first and how everything unfolds and, what's the first shoe to drop. If it's just the audits, for example, that's a situation where I could see it potentially sparking a lot more violence, political violence across the country, because again, it could be seen as a, sort of a counter coup by the right or something like that. And a lot of people on the left could get violent over that if it's something having to do with the audits. But when all this other information comes out about what's been going on and how all of us have been targeted, but I think the biggest thing, of course, would be, what's been happening with the children. I think once this information comes out, this is going to, in my view, instead of sending us into a warlike posture, I think the world's going to come to a grinding halt. I think people aren't going to know what to do with themselves. I think there's going to be, and that's where the EBS is going to come in. And I think we're going to see a lot of disclosure at that point to try to heal the country. Because I think the people are going to be hurting when they really figure out what's actually been going on here.
When people figure out that the matrix they've been in is going to completely collapse, that they've been living a lie outside of their personal experiences, we've all been debt slaves for decades. Well, actually, technically since 1913, and there's so much that's going to hit. I think they're going to have to try to give enough disclosure to even get moderate leftists to wake up in a very short period of time, is because this drip, it has to start coming to a stream. We can't drip anymore. It's the dripping.
I think at that point, once the floodgates are open,
yeah,
I think that I absolutely agree. I think that's going to start. It's going to be very, very, very fast. A lot of information. Because at that point, they don't have a choice.
Yeah, they have to, because now President Trump is coming out very bold, and he looks like himself again. He's talking strong. He's not, he's like, no, they stole it, and we're fixing 2020, period, end of story. And he said people in his advisors were trying to tell him to move on. He refused it. I'm like, thank God he refused it, because I'm sorry, anyone saying, "Oh, just move on," they're part of it, in my personal opinion. I'm sorry, because
Trump's a tactician. He wanted to figure out who those people were.
Yep, and I hope they're dealt with, because I don't care how innocent they are. The fact that allowing the biggest theft in United States history and world history, probably too, because of the vast strength of the United States, and knowing how pretty much the world is so interconnected. What happens here affects the rest of the world. You steal the United States, people are going to think, well, what do we have left? If they don't, but people are probably scratching their heads like, wait a minute. If they would have, if he wasn't in power, he'd be dead by now. So why does he have Secret Service still guarding him to the point as if he's still a president? But they're like, he's not the president. Well, then explain to me the motorcades. Obama doesn't even get motorcades. He doesn't get that. He has a Secret Service team. That's it. They don't make a big deal of it. They're very quiet about it. Trump rolls in, and you got Secret Service vehicles. You got every police agency in that entire area escorting him. I'm like, wait a minute. It's like, let's call a spade a spade. Oh no, well, he's technically not the president. Well, if he's technically not the president, why are they treating
him like the most powerful man in the world?
What is all of a sudden the Secret Service just decided to finally be patriots after 100 years? No, there's a reason for it.
And meanwhile, you've got the National Guard and the Marines that are turning their back on Biden at the inauguration. That doesn't ever happen.
They get court-martialed for doing that.
You bet.
If Biden was legitimately in, all those people on there would have all been court-martialed, every one of them.
Absolutely.
Because that is serious stuff right here, because a soldier, unfortunately, has to follow every order and show that it's part of the uniform code. I've never been in the military, but what people told me, it's that big of a deal. You turn your back and you don't even salute. Actually, turning your back is literally like treason, according to the military. That's literally like, you
don't turn your back on the commander in chief, right?
No,
you just don't do that.
That can be life or death for someone. Yeah.
Yeah. And there are just so many examples of that we've seen over and over and over and
Yeah.
over again that just
So
don't add up.
the thing is right now, and I'm glad to see I'm glad to see President Trump saying what we've been saying all along. There is no 2022. There is no 2024. 2020 has to be fixed and changed because they're going to rig the hell out of 2022 if it stays the same. Believe me, they think, oh, Republicans are poised to take back the House. Yeah, theoretically, yes, but they stole the presidency. What's not for them not to say is gloves off. We're going to steal everything now.
Well, anybody who's suggesting that we can wait until 2022 and make a comeback is
No,
honestly either they're cabal, either they're on the other side, or they're just beyond asleep.
Oh yeah.
I mean, if you actually believe that this country can survive what we just survived again and actually remain intact, the only thing that's keeping this country intact right now is the patience of the patriots and the belief in the plan.
Yep.
And I think that the white hats understand that very well. And there are a lot of people, very prominent people, who have talked about this. Simon Parks talked about this. Gene Decode talks about this, that they're very aware of the fact that the American people, the American patriots, have not really shown up to the party yet. We have sat on our hands. We've remained patient. We've remained in prayer and in faith. And ultimately, that faith is all riding on this plan.
Yeah.
And that's really what it comes down to, because I don't think for a second, I mean, just imagine for a moment that you had never heard of Q and I'd never heard of it. And, you know, there was no such thing or whatever. And we witnessed what we witnessed. You really think that people would have just sat back and done nothing?
Yeah.
I don't.
No.
I don't. I think that the reason that folks didn't do that is because that they believed that there was something bigger at play, because of all the Q drops, because of all the intel, because, and again, this was not something, of course, the white hats are very smart. They didn't do this. It wasn't like they just started posting a month before the election. They were training all of us how to read code, how to communicate in code, how to put pieces together. And they did it. They started doing it. What was it, back in 2017?
Yep.
So this was something that was long, you know, this is a long process that we've been putting all of our faith in. But if this wasn't there, I just can't imagine folks like us and all of the people out there listening. I can't imagine that we would just say, oh, well, I guess we'll get them next time.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, there's nothing left. And Trump is exactly right. There's nothing left when you don't have free elections. If you don't have free and fair elections, you don't have a country. It's that simple. You just don't. And we all witnessed a theft occur at high noon. I mean, you know, we all saw and we all understand exactly what happened. And the people out there who don't understand, or who are trying to make the claim that there's no evidence of election fraud or that it's a conspiracy theory, I mean, these people, it absolutely boggles the mind, because there's so much evidence that, to me, it's obvious. It's not even, you don't even really have to make a case. But what actually happened was that the evidence was never heard. This was all blocked by, and of course you know this, but just underscoring this for the audience, this was all blocked by corrupt judges.
Oh yeah.
We told the plaintiffs they had no standing. That's why none of the evidence was ever brought into the public arena. That was all done. And of course, the media tells folks, yeah, see, judge says there's no evidence. There's nothing there. And that's what a lot of people believe. But when the scientific data comes out, what are people going to say then?
Yeah.
I mean, what are you going to say at that point? Well, it's not real data. I mean, sure, there are going to be some people who aren't going to believe, like I said, they're not going to believe the sky is blue. But a vast majority of people out there, once they realize that they've been conned and deceived and lied to and viciously targeted and attacked by the media and this disinformation campaign and this theft and this pandemic and all of it. I mean, come on. Once all this stuff comes out and the truth doesn't have to compete with the disinformation anymore, it's going to be a radical shift. And I think that, but Trump understands that, you know, we've reached that point. It's not about you're absolutely right. It's not about 2022. I mean, I don't want to hear anybody talk about 2022. If somebody starts talking about, oh, well, this is what we got to do. I mean, I'm sorry, but you're way too three-dimensional at this point. You got to start thinking outside the box.
I personally think they're traitors at this point. When they're saying, oh, that's it, forget 2020.
Oh, yeah.
It's the same thing as occurring. A friend of yours, a female, was just sexually assaulted, came beaten up, tested, saying, yeah, bad things happened to her, she can prove it. And then the court saying, well, screw him. Well, sorry, you don't have standing. Really, I don't have standing. Well, I have proof I was violated. I have proof, and here's my affidavit. I went to the police, bloodied up. Basically, the country is going to the courts, bloodied up, saying, this has been stolen and you don't care. Well, I think the whole point is they obviously knew President Trump and the White Hats knew this. They knew how corrupt the courts are, even though he nominated and got confirmed over 300 federal judges, which has actually been holding the line quite a bit on the Second Amendment and a lot of things. And thank God for that, because it would have gotten uglier earlier if that didn't happen. So at the judicial system, at the federal level, but not the Supreme Court level, things have been moving in our direction. Finally, after decades, finally. It's still not enough, but there's a lot of people that are willing to be more patient, because I think that's what's been happening. I think a lot of these judges are probably in on the plan too. I think they're coming out and saying, oh, red flag laws are not right either. No, police, you can't just go into someone's home and take their guns without a warrant. That's interesting. That just popped up, how one guy took it to court. But red flag laws have been in since like 2018 in a lot of states that enacted them. California.
Right, and now all of a sudden, under a supposed Biden administration, they're getting struck down. I don't think so.
That's very strange how that happens, because under a dictatorship, it would like if it was a dictatorship that was actually in full control, they have some control, but not all control. It would have been like 6 months later, they would have done all these shootings that were happening. All of a sudden, they're trying to push gun control, and they still can't get anything passed. That's very interesting to know how they still can't pass anything, because they know how pissed off the people are.
And people understand too that a lot of these mass shootings,
they're all MK Ultra.
All 100. Well, either MK Ultra, or they were just complete false flags.
No, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, I think they activate these people, and I think they've gotten that MK Ultra down to such control that the media just puts out key things, and then whoever steps up to the plate does it, and then the feds step in behind them and give them what they need, because they're now finally proving the FBI had people undercover at the riots and didn't stop the riots. They were the ones starting it. So now the three-letter agencies are looking horrible, worse than ever, just as bad as it was in the 90s. Why the ATF had to go basically Hitler on the on the Branch Davidians, and then and the Weaver family. They're trying to save face, but how are you going to save face now when you've been caught? Spygate. It was the FBI the whole time, the CIA and the FBI.
Well, I think that what we're going to find out once all of this comes out, what we're going to find out is that most of the big events, most of the big news stories that we've witnessed in our lifetime have been engineered false flags, and people are going to absolutely it's going to blow their minds.
Oh yeah.
I mean, people are going to learn the truth about so many different things, and they're going to realize that most of this stuff has been the cabal all along, stringing us along. And the biggest problem that we face, I think, is that your average person can't accept the enormity of the truth that a satanic cabal exists and is in control. That's really what it comes down to. That's what most people, when you start talking about whatever issue you want to talk about, right? But all roads lead to the cabal.
Yes.
Right? And that's where the conversation usually, in my experience, hits a brick wall, because people, once you finally get to that point and you've talked to people and you've led them up to that point, that's the biggest hurdle. People can't accept this idea that there's this massive conspiracy to wipe out humanity.
Yeah.
And they can't accept that there is, in fact, a satanic cabal that does, not only do they exist, but they're in control of everything. Most people can't buy that. I mean, and most people, even I mean, I don't know, I want to say most Trump supporters, but certainly there are a lot of even Trump supporters who just, this completely foreign concept to them.
Oh yeah.
They just think in terms of 4-year cycles, 2-year cycles, elections, and they're very much inside of a box. And this whole Great Awakening is all going to be about thinking outside of that box and being introduced. It's like, did you ever see that movie, The Truman Show?
I never seen that movie yet.
Well, without ruining any and going into a huge explanation, basically in the movie, it turns out that this guy named Truman thinks he's living his life just like everybody else in the world. And it turns out that he's actually on a TV show, and that this entire world has been constructed for him. It's basically all just a movie set, the one giant movie set. And I think that in a lot of ways, that movie was some soft disclosure there, that and that, along with many other movies I could talk about, that we're living in a world that has been concocted and constructed, that is based upon, it's based upon all of it's based upon lies. All of it is based upon deception.
Yeah.
And the enormity of it, even for folks like us who are paying attention, who are awake and aware, the enormity of it, I don't think has even occurred to people like us, how much our world is false and how much of it is an illusion, and how much of our mindset and how much of it has been basically implanted into us by the cabal through all this conditioning, and how much of our history and our past and the truth about who we really are and where we really came from, and all of our sacred books that have been hidden from us, all of this stuff. I mean, there's no possible way that this could be more epic in terms of how much information is going to come out. And I think that the biggest problem, again, coming back to waking people up, the biggest problem that people have is they can't get people to buy into this concept. They can't get them to see it. See, most people, they look at the world and they see a very broken world. They see a world full of problems. How could you not? But they think that the world just is this way because of humanity, because of human nature, that it's our nature to destroy each other and to be violent and to be hateful toward one another and all this stuff, not understanding the divide and conquer strategy that's been in place for millennia now by these people. They don't understand that that the world is the way that it is by and large by design, that these people have hidden in the shadows, and they've been able to engineer our society to the brink of destruction. And that's where we're at right now. Yeah. And we really have a choice as humanity has a choice. We either wake up and we come together and we unify against the real enemy, or we destroy each other. And I think that the entire Q plan was looking forward into the future and projecting into that was the timeline we were on. That was the crossroads that humanity was going to reach. We were either going to wake up, and we were going to either throw off the chains and realize that we've been, you mentioned debt slavery. I mean, that's the main silent weapon. That's the crux of their entire program. That's the crux of their oppression against us, is economic debt slavery. Mm-hmm. And once people realize that, but it's not just about debt slavery, it goes way, way beyond that. But once people realize that this world that we're living in has been created to oppress us, that we really are, as Alex Jones says, on a prison planet that's been made this way. It didn't naturally evolve this way. It's like they say that the devil's greatest trick was convincing the world he didn't exist. Yeah. And most people out there don't believe. They think, okay, well, yeah, maybe there's some nuts out there who are really Satanists, or they're into this, weird stuff, but it's really, just an aberration. It's just a small amount of people. Wait till they find out that 2.5 million people have been arrested worldwide.
Wow.
Wait till they find out how many people are involved in this cabal. See, that's just the thing is people, and they have the people that get involved in this. Some it's by choice, but oftentimes, of course, it's, the Epstein method. They blackmail them and they get involved in this cabal, but they're told they swear, they have to swear allegiance to this group above all else.
Yep.
Or else. These are people, these are the most evil people on the earth. There's nothing they wouldn't do.
Imagine when people find out that the satanic panic back in the 90s was all true, because what they did was they tried convincing people, oh, satanic panic, that was just a bunch of religious nuts, those crazy Christians, they just don't like people practicing Satanism and all that kind of stuff. It's harmless, they don't really hurt people, that kind of thing. Well,
the media treats it like
what we're finding out is that that's exactly what they've been doing. So the satanic panic was a legitimate fear, is because I'm reading on the GCR stating that I guess it was the what was it? It was on a certain date that they do certain things, certain satanic rituals, and they said report any Satanism to your local police if you find out about it. Why are they telling you that? Because there's a lot of evidence that this stuff is more real than that people want to know. So it's funny how you mentioned that, and I was thinking about that. I'm like, I must be reading my mind, because that's why I'm like, the satanic panic is going to be proven true, and a lot of people, even a lot of atheists, a lot of them, they're going to get a huge kick in the gut and realize they've been wrong. A lot of these, not in their belief system, but they were told the satanic panic is nothing more than a bunch of Baptists screaming at the pulpit saying, oh, there's just evil people not coming to Christ over here. No, they're doing horrible things to people.
Well, it goes beyond the 90s as well. It goes, farther back. One example that I talked about on my show was when I was getting into James Casbolt's book, Agent Buried Alive. And he talked a lot about Halley's Comet and how, that there was actually a Draco alien spaceship that was following that comet in the 80s. But,
Wow.
One of the things that, and that's the other thing. And you and I haven't even really gotten in yet to non-terrestrials. That's a whole different can of worms that we could talk about. Probably not tonight, but we could certainly talk about. But in terms of that book, so much of our perception, we were just talking about Satanism and how so many people in the public have this perception about it, that it's just only a few nuts, basically. That's what Hollywood has convinced most of the public, and all of that is by design. In Agent Buried Alive, he talks about how Hollywood's function is to cover up for leaks when the truth actually starts to come out. That's why they started to do all of these science fiction movies. That's why they started to do these movies like, The Matrix and The Truman Show and all of these different, the list goes on and on. So whatever they put in the movies is actually real. They mix it in with fiction so that they have plausible deniability, of course, so that the public associates whatever's real, whatever's actually out there. They associate it with fantasy because it's lumped in with a bunch of other things that are fictional. And all this is done by design to create the perception of the public that these things don't really exist. So therefore, most of the public, they don't believe that election fraud really exists. They don't believe that Satan worship really exists. And if it does, that it's just, a couple of whack jobs somewhere. But they don't understand that this is you want to talk about rituals. These people, once you start to get into the rabbit hole and you start to really explore and research all of the symbology and all of the rituals and all of the things that they do, they take this 100% serious.
Oh yeah.
But they want us to believe that it's all a big joke, you see.
Hmm.
Just like they don't want us to believe. That's why they target Christians, because they don't want people to turn to God, you see. They want people to turn to them. And they create all of this chaos and all of this confusion. And their hope is that we're going to fall down on our knees to them and say, save us. Ultimately, that's what they want to do. But people are going to, once they realize that what's really going on here, once they realize the enormity of it, going back to what we were talking about a while ago, awakening is a process for most people. For you and I, and for everybody out there listening, awakening has been a process. But I've talked about, before on my show, that for the general public, for the people who are still asleep right now, this is not going to be a process of awakening. This is going to be like a ton of bricks hitting people,
Yeah.
especially if people are still hitting that snooze button right now and they're still, acting as if all of this stuff is fake, all of it's a conspiracy. But the truth can't be held back forever.
No.
And sooner or later, and that's why we're seeing all of this disclosure happen.
Yeah.
I believe that, that's why we're seeing all this stuff about non-terrestrials. That's why we're seeing all of this stuff about celebrities start to come out. I think what they're doing is they're priming the pump. They're getting people ready to the best of their ability to be able to actually withstand this onslaught of information. Because I don't know about you, but when I learned about certain things for the first time, there's just no words to describe the way that I felt and what I experienced and the way that it changed me. And this was at a time, of course, where, nobody else was really paying attention to learning about these things. And there I am, I'm learning about, what goes on in these DUMBs, for example, or at least part of what goes on in these DUMBs. And there are no words to describe what that information does to your psyche. It changes you. You never are the same once you realize the realities of what goes on in this world, and how different it is from the wool that's being pulled over our eyes, the illusion that we're led to believe, how different it is from the reality and the horrors. I think that people are going to be really, really in need of leadership. And I think people are going to really be in need of folks like you and I and other people out there in the audience who have had time to be able to process all of this, to be able to lead people through I guess you could say their awakening, but it's not going to it's going to be a process, but it's going to be a very, very different one from the one that you and I went through. And I think that sometimes I get caught up in the day-to-day and I don't focus on some of the really, really dark stuff that I've learned about and that I've talked about a lot of the time on my show. And I think to myself, sometimes I can lose perspective on that because I start focusing on the audits or I start focusing on other aspects of things that are going on. But when I get back to the most disturbing elements of all, the element of the human trafficking and the children and the horrors that go on there, I think to myself, it brings me back to a baseline. And I say to myself, this is going to be information that is going to change the world in a way that we've never seen before in history.
Yeah.
Once this information becomes on the public consciousness and people understand what's been happening, I don't think that there's anybody out there who's going to have an appetite for a war except for against the cabal.
No.
But I also believe that, that's why a lot of these people have already been dealt with and taken out and arrested and are in Gitmo right now. So I think it's going to be, I don't know when all this is going to happen. Some folks are saying, that I certainly do think it's going to be a very hot summer, as I've been talking about. I think we're going to see a lot of things heat up. I'm not going to speculate necessarily on what, but I certainly think that given what we saw in June and all of the things that are starting to fall into place, start to see, we talked a lot about Trump tonight. I think that we're going to start to see some major movement. What do you think is, do you have any thoughts about what do you think is going to transpire next, or what your gut is telling you?
My gut's telling me that the people who are not awake are not going to have the luxury of awakening slowly over the past few years like we have. Um, is I always like to point that in 1775, approximately, well, the country first started with 3% of the men actually doing the fighting and 17% supporting that 3%. The 80% were just sitting back and either uh, either were neutral, just didn't care, or just said they're going to stick with the with the redcoats still. We're going to have a bigger percentage this time of taking back the country and also the world. So when a lot of this disclosure comes out, yeah, people are going to need us around, and that's not tooting our own horns. That's just saying is, look, we've been trying to tell you this for a long time. It's some things are so absurd and so illogical. Yeah, I could agree that you'd want to avoid that like the plague, but it's in your face now. So
Yeah, I think that people are going to actually be considered prophets. The same people that were considered nuts
yeah,
and
like
conspiracy
King Clement,
theorists.
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
think that the average person, I'm not suggesting that they are prophets. I'm not saying that we
No,
are
no, no.
prophets. But what I'm saying is that the perception of the sleeping masses is going to be that we are prophets, that we were somehow like oracles that were able to see into the future.
Yeah,
Forgetting, of course, that we were trying to tell them the entire time. But of course, they could see it. I don't fully understand the mindset or the way that the brain of an asleep person works, because at this point, it boggles the mind. Like I've said many times, I don't understand how they're not waking up. I don't understand how they're not seeing the same things that I'm seeing and coming to such different conclusions, but I think that folks are really, really in for a rude awakening.
oh yeah,
And they're going to need people like us, because they're going to look at us and they say, my God, how did you know this?
it's like, well, we've been trying to warn you.
Right.
But and it's like I'm like it's going back to again. It's like I get it, but you can't put your head in the sand any longer. You have to pick a lane. Either you're going to be the lane in the bad guys, lane of the good guys, or the lane of, I submit to whatever comes my way. Like, yeah, no, that I don't roll that way, and I'm not, certainly not on the bad side. So it's it's some people are self-destructive in that way. They pretend there's no evil that could harm them in that aspect, and unfortunately it affects the entire planet. And God, Ronald Savin says it beautifully. He says, how can God bless a nation that can't even protect their weakest? And it
Oh,
comes out
absolutely.
and it comes out
Absolutely.
and that's a gut punch to a lot of people to say, yeah. And I mean, I consider myself very blessed. I have a very good family. I've been blessed with, later in life. But there's evils out there that if we don't tackle now, it's going to be much harder to deal with later. And
Well, one of the things that I talk about on my show is the cabal mindset that they've implanted almost.
yeah,
More and more, the more I learn about mind control and the way that it actually works, I mean, the mindset has actually been the thought forms that we have, the electromagnetic thought forms that we have actually been created by the cabal. But that's a topic for another day. But in essence, we've been given a mindset that tells us to focus on ourselves.
yeah,
That we've been indoctrinated into a world where we are encouraged to focus on ourselves as individuals. We're not really encouraged to look to the left and the right and to be concerned about the welfare of our fellows. We are encouraged to entrust that responsibility to the state. And look at where that has gotten us. And that's just one example of where we have, and again, I understand the basic concept of government, which is to create a system, of course, where you have representation so that you don't have to be focused on all these things all the time. I understand that. But I think there's a difference between having elected representatives and being completely brainwashed into thinking you should just vote for red or blue and think that that's going to make your life better, or think that that's what represents you, to let them create this divide and conquer environment. That we've allowed this to happen.
Oh, yeah.
Because when you think about it, if more people out there were active politically, I mean, it's probably a very, very small, it's a very small percentage, ultimately, I think, in my opinion, a small percentage of the population that even votes. But it's an even smaller percentage of the population that's politically active. And can you imagine how different the world would be? I mean, you talked about in 1775, back when this country was born. Yeah, there were a lot of people who didn't necessarily support the war and didn't get involved in the fighting, but there certainly was a very different attitude amongst the common person about their knowledge about the way the world really works and their role in society. These people had a sense of civic duty and civic responsibility.
Yep.
And the attitude of your average person was how that they could best serve their community and serve their fellows. And we have drifted so far from that. Not to say everybody, not to say everywhere, but as a collective, as a general culture, we've allowed the cabal to rob us of that birthright, of that way of life. We've allowed them to come in. And the reason that we've allowed it is because they've dangled shiny objects in front of us. And they've created a system of debt slavery. And they've created a system where happiness supposedly is greenbacks. And, if you have enough of those and you get ahead of the next guy and you step on enough people, then, you rise to the top like them and you can be someone who actually matters in society. And that's the world they created. And when you think about how many people that world marginalized, how many people didn't fit into that paradigm, and yet somehow had to find a way to get through life with some integrity. This is the world that they've trapped us in this system. And in this mindset. And I believe, Lynn Wood is a guy that has said many times about celebrity and about, the things that we focus on. Again, not everybody, and certainly not people in this audience, but when you're talking about our culture in general, the things that, your average person focuses on and thinks are important and thinks that is even worthy of their time. We're going to get to a point where I think after all of this information comes out and after the nation has grieved and healed and come together and unified in the healing process, I don't think we're going to give a damn about celebrities anymore. I don't think we're going to give a damn about, what we're going to care about is we're going to go back, according to Lynn, and I agree with this, we're going to go back to our original values that we had in this country. The values that our ancestors had that slowly and systematically have been stripped away from us over the generations.
Oh, yeah.
And you notice every generation gets,
Worse and worse.
Worse and worse and worse. And that's not an accident. You see a lot of people out there will think, well, kids these days, whatever. And they just kind of write it off as saying, well, older people always complain about younger generations. And that's just the way it is. But the reality is it is getting worse. It's getting worse and worse with every generation. And the people who see it and the people who point it out, well, great. But you have to understand that it didn't happen by accident. You have to understand that all of this stuff is being done, that the youth is being targeted at a level that is far beyond even what you and I were targeted with when we were kids.
Oh,
And so what we're seeing right now, the sickness that we're seeing in this world, kind of the general overall point that I was making, sure, that I'm not suggesting that every single manifestation of evil on the planet has to do with the cabal. I'm not suggesting that. But when you look at the big issues, the big problems, the real, the real sickness in our society, whether it be drugs or whether it be crime or whether it be poverty and the haves and the have-nots, and I mean, you could go down the list. When you go down the list of all the big issues, again, all roads lead to the cabal. And I think that that's the main, that what they've been able to do, first of all, is convince people they don't exist, but certainly they've been able to hide in the shadows by pitting humanity against humanity, by having us fight each other, by having us war with each other, because that's great for them. If humanity kills itself off, then that's wonderful. That's exactly what they want. That's why a civil war is exactly what the cabal would want. There's nothing they would want more than to watch Americans slaughter each other. And so that's why I believe in the plan. And then I believe that this whole process was to avoid that. And that ultimately, I think that while we may see some fireworks, and undoubtedly will, I don't think we're going to see a full-scale civil war in this country. I pray to God that I'm right about that, of course.
Yeah.
But we'll have to see, of course, how things roll out. But things are definitely getting crazy, right?
Well, they're escalating to clown world times 100.
Well, the other thing too is, we keep coming back to 107, so we might as well stick with it. He's been talking a lot lately about the idea that we're headed for a real gut punch here, as if we haven't received a whole bunch of them already.
Yeah. Like what?
Right?
We need more.
Well, that's what he's saying. I watched a couple of his interviews recently. There's one, I think, with Michael Jaco. I think there was another one with David Nino Rodriguez.
Yeah.
And, he was basically making that same point, like, man, you guys better buckle up and get some better hand cream, because if you think that it's bad now, it's going to get a heck of a lot worse before it gets better. And I think that that's going to be a real challenge moving forward. And I've stressed that to my audience, is that, I keep bringing this up and keep reminding people of this, because I believe that as we move forward into the next, days, weeks, months, I'm not really sure, but I think it's going to certainly be days, weeks, and months. I certainly don't think it's going to be years. I don't think we have years like we talked about.
No, we don't.
But in the days, weeks, and months ahead, the things that we're going to see, I mean, we're being told that we're going to see some real ugly stuff that's going to make it seem as if all hope is lost. I mean, that's actually what he said.
Yeah.
And I think it's important. I mean, I don't think that he would be saying, I mean, unless he's just a flat out disinformation agent, which I don't believe, I don't think there's any reason he would be saying that other than to prepare people to the best of his ability to remember that, hey, when things start getting really bad, remember that I told you that they were going to get really bad. And remember that I told you the reason why they were going to get really bad. And try to be mindful of that. Now, depending upon what the situation is, I mean, gosh, we have no idea what's going to happen. So I'm wondering, with every day that passes, is today going to be the day? Are we going to see some major event? And it's funny, because I was reflecting recently about this, and I've talked about this, that with every day that goes by, if you're like me and you're waiting for the next shoe to drop, with every day that goes by, you start to ask yourself, whether it's consciously or maybe it's just a subconscious kind of gnawing at you, like, is today going to be the day? Is today going to be the day? But with every day that goes by and something big, something overtly big that shocks the public doesn't happen, you start to kind of wonder after a while, when is this going to happen? Right. But then I think to myself, going back to, what was the last major event that we had in this country that really shocked people to the core? Right? You could make a lot of different arguments, but let's just go with 9/11, right? On 9/11, every American and really every other person in the world woke up that day and got dressed, took a shower, brushed their teeth, went to work, never thinking that something was going to happen that day that was going to completely change history. And I think that what we're going to witness, and I mean no disrespect to anyone who suffered from 9/11, but what we're going to witness, I think, is going to make it look small in comparison.
Yeah, I think so too.
So once all this stuff starts to really come out, it's going to be, oh my goodness, the normalcy bias, even for people who are awake, that's the thing. Days, you expect things are going to happen. Going back to the inauguration, I really thought that the military, maybe I was just being overly optimistic, but I really thought that the military was going to storm in there and start arresting people.
I was
You know?
wishing that too.
And when that didn't happen, it was like, okay, well, when's the next big thing? When's the next big opportunity? And that's kind of what was my mindset for a little while. Like, all right, when's the military going to step in? They're not going to actually let this guy take power, are they? Because if he takes power, we're screwed. But the more the time goes on, you start to get into a mindset where you start to wonder when this big event is going to happen and what it's going to be and what it's going to look like. And sometimes it feels like it's not even going to happen because it's all you're doing is talking about it, and you're anticipating it and it's not happening and it's not happening. It's not happening. But I think that, and that's why I keep coming back to situations like, disclosure about COVID or the audits, because these are mainstream issues. And ultimately, you take the situation with the audits, that information can't be kept under wraps forever. I mean,
No.
they have to tell the American people what they found. Everybody knows that there's an audit going on there. They have to tell people what they found, and what they found, of course, is scientific proof that the election was stolen. And what's the country going to do to that? That, it can't be business as usual at that point.
No. Well, listen, I'm gonna have to hop off because I gotta go do a little more studying.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I forgot you had your test tomorrow.
That's all good. It's all good.
Absolutely. Well, listen, it was
I'd
been
go
a
for
great
another hour.
conversation.
I'd go for another hour if I had the time tonight. But
Absolutely.
we'll have to
Yeah.
catch up and whenever we're both free. So just we'll have to get together on that next one and continue off.
Yeah, absolutely. We had a list of topics that some of them we didn't even get into. So we'll save those for the next time. And, good luck. I know you're taking a test tomorrow. I had forgotten about that. So yeah, you got to go do your studying, do the right thing, and good luck on your test. And yeah, I'll be in touch. We'll set up another chat. I really enjoyed this one.
Yeah, man.
And yeah, God bless, brother.
God bless, my friend.
Talk to you soon.
It's always a pleasure, and Godspeed. Thanks to everyone listening out there, and we love you all, and keep the faith. Keep your powder dry.
Absolutely, brother. Absolutely. Please support Omega. Please support his channel. Like, subscribe, share the links to this video, and we'll be back soon, guys. God bless.
God bless.